Captain Dan here, Goober Time Guide Service. In today's video I want to show you how I make my very own dragging weights. I used to buy these things, but I came up with a design. They're pretty simple, pretty cheap, and you can really customize them and make them exactly how you want them. So without wasting any more time, let's hit the workbench. I'll show you all the stuff you need for them and a couple different options you can use to make them. Before we jump into this project, just know that any of these materials that you might possibly need are all linked in the description down below, so make sure you check that out. And I made it really nice so you can just go on and buy all this stuff in one place if this is a project you want to do for yourself. Now the very first thing you want to do is kind of think about the length of your tubing that you want. I've got some heat shrink tubing right here. I've got a whole 65-foot roll of it, so you can really make these however long you want. Do you want some short little stubby dragging weights? Or are you going through some thick nasty stuff and want some longer ones? You can make them 3 feet long if you wanted to. It doesn't matter to me. But just give it some thought, or you know what, make a whole bunch of different ones and try them out. You never know what you're gonna like best. For me, after playing around for a little bit, I like these to be right around 9 inches. And I'm gonna make a whole batch of these today, so I'm gonna go ahead and measure this out right around 9 inches. This is gonna be my template, so I'm gonna make sure this one's right on the money. Not that it really matters, I'm just making homemade dragging weights. Got that mark, and that's cut nice and clean right across the top. Yeah, this one's right around 9 inches. I'm gonna measure them all to be the same. I don't know about you, but I'm picky about things like that on my boat. Okay, so we've got a nice even 10 right there. That's gonna be ready to rock. One thing you do wanna think about with your heat shrink is you want it to be a 3-to-1 ratio. It's really gonna shrink down then. I'm using 1/2 inch. I chose to go green. You can probably get it cheaper if you go with black, or there's all kinds of colors you can choose. Another couple nice features about this is dual walled, so nice thick tubing, waterproof, and adhesive line. We'll show you why all that's important as we build along here. I have this one linked down below, just like everything else in this project. I originally thought about going with 3/8 inch for my diameter here on my tubing, but you know, I did a little bit of math and figured out exactly how I wanted to make these, so did all the thinking for you. 1/2 inch is the way to go for this, but again, fine tune it, whatever works for you. Now there are plenty of options with what you want to do to fill these in with, and I've got 3 really good ones for you here. I've got a link down below that has some lead shot. So these little lead BBs are pretty solid right here. If I zero my scale out, it doesn't take a whole lot of them to get some weight going on here. So just that little bit is almost 3.5 ounces right there. If you go with that option, you're gonna want to buy some steel BBs down there as well. I'll build this one up since I have everything measured out, and I'll use some 3/8 inch tubing. So we'll build that one at some point in this video too. Now, another thing I have linked in the comments section down below, which you can buy on Amazon, are these steel BBs. But the problem with these is they're not nearly as dense as the lead. So you're gonna have to get quite a few of them in there to get about 3.5 ounces. And if you do that, you might have to go longer than 9 inches on your tubing here. So we'll do a quick little experiment. There's 3.75 ounces. Let's see if this even fits in the tubing. I'm just gonna fold over the one end, pour these in, and see how much room it takes in our tubing here to fill this thing up. All right, you can probably get away with doing this in a 1/2 inch tubing. I don't have too much more to go, and I only spilled a few, but it's getting tight in there. These fill up space really quick. So there we go. That tubing is just about full. You'd still have to find a way to plug it out, and that's probably not the best option, but if you don't want to work with lead, it will work. Just cut your tubing a little bit longer. These BBs were my original idea, but you know what? They're just taking up way too much room. I need a denser metal. And that's when I got to thinking. I thought if I could step up to a 1/2 inch material here, and I could fill this with some bigger lead balls, then that would really work for me. So I started looking around for 1/2 inch lead balls, and what led me to, I was originally thinking marbles and steel balls and things like that, but eventually I found this lead bullet mold, which I have linked down in the description below. This makes a perfectly round 50 caliber lead ball, which is used for muskets, I guess. But for us, it's gonna work perfect for our project. And this was really the key to this thing, bringing it home for me, and that's why I wanna share it with you. So I went ahead and melted down a whole bunch of lead, and I'll show you the process real quick. This thing's real easy. All you need to do is pour some lead into these holes, let it sit for a couple seconds. I like to use a wooden mallet, and I just tap on the little lever off the front. It shears off the top edge, so you get a nice clean cut on the balls. Drop them into something. I use a muffin pan, and then you're good to go. And that's what led us here. I've got a whole stack of these ready to go. I've experimented a little bit with my weights so far, and I've used up 2 of them. So the nice thing about these is if we want to get to about 3.5 ounces, there's 2, 4, 6, and 8, and we're just under 3.5 ounces. So that's what we're gonna go with. I'm gonna go 8 in each sinker, keep everything uniform, and I'll know they're right around 3.5 ounces. Now I do guide on the James River, which has a lot of current, but I don't drag in current. I drag off where it's more slack. So 3.5 ounces is plenty to get me down to the bottom. And if I ever need heavier, I can just make some. Put a couple extra lead balls in there and we've got all the weight we need. I actually made one over here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That one comes in at just over 5.5 ounces. So that'll really get me down to the bottom if I ever want to get crazy. So aside from that, all you're really going to need is some swivels. I bought these right here. These are from Dr. Fish. I've got them linked down below. They're size 1/0. Perfectly fine. I've already experimented with them and they work great. So let's get a pile of those going and let's get to work. If you're going to use these BBs here, I did link some marbles down below that'll fit in the shrink tubing. You're going to want to plug off one of the ends so that when you pour your BBs in, they don't come flying out the end, kind of like they were earlier for me in the video. So if that's the route you want to go, get yourself some marbles. And same thing if you go with the smaller lead shot. That's not going to stick in the heat shrink by itself. Get yourself some kind of steel ball bearing, match the size of the heat shrink you're going to do. I'll make one up in 3/8 here in a minute, but most of this video is going to be based on the 1/2 inch. Now, I'm not going to beg you to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and write a comment down below. But what I will tell you is that next time you're on a super hot bite, if you don't do those 3 things, you're either going to run out of the bait or the lure that is absolutely smacking the fish. Now, the best thing you can do is go take care of those 3 easy things right now, because I wouldn't want you to miss out on that hot bite. It helps the channel a lot and we appreciate your support. Now, when I was first experimenting with these, I ended up with some pretty wild looking ones here. Some of my originals had some gaps in there, some air pockets, and it's fine and all. I mean, it's just a sinker, but I do want them to look nice. So one thing I did is I kind of measured out 7 balls, and you'll see why I chose 7 in a second. So I took 7, lined them all up, got some heat shrink here. And then with some painter's tape, I just marked a screwdriver so I know exactly how far to push those in. And once I get to 7 balls, I'll be hitting the top of the last one. So I know that one is seated in just as far. So if I take my heat shrink, and you can kind of picture it right here, if I push the first ball in until that screwdriver bottoms out, right at that blue tape, I know I've got room for 7 more on top of it. So play around with your weights and whatnot, figure out how much you want to go here, and that might be a trick that helps you out. So from here, it's just pretty simple. Stuff these in here. I went with 1/2 inch balls and 1/2 inch heat shrink, so it's a pretty tight fit. And now I just got to tap it in. And while I do that, I'm trying to just expand the tubing and make it as round as possible. It did ship flat, so that's one thing you got to be careful of. And just work it down. Keep tapping, 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 right until the blue tape meets the top there. Now I've got room for 7 more balls on top of it. So just repeat that process. Put one in, tap it in. You'll hear a different noise when the lead ball hits the other lead ball, and that's where you want to stop. Okay, there we go, that's solid. While I'm doing this, I also like to hold the furthest one down so I don't accidentally knock the whole set all the way further in. But now that I've got a couple in there, this thing's not going anywhere. There's 3. A wooden dowel would work really well for this too. There we go. 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the last one, you can just shove it in there. So that should come right up pretty much flush to the end. At this point, it's time to get the heat gun going. And I like to have some pliers here because this stuff does get pretty hot. It's adhesive lined and it's plastic, so as you heat it up, it gets pretty hot. So I'll start my heat gun up and just do the last ball, kind of lock that in place. I like to keep the heat shrink moving so it kind of melts evenly and shrinks down evenly. So I'll just rotate it here over and over and over. Okay, then we're gonna stop there. This next step is completely optional, but it's kind of the difference between going from something like this, which has a skinnier part, which I think could get wedged in a tree, to something more along the lines of this, where it's more of a uniform shape all the way through. So what we're gonna do is get some, it's called backer rod. It's not really a rod, it's just some foam tubing here. And I bought this in 3/8, again, link down below. But I wanted this in a size that took up a lot of the channel in my tubing, but also wasn't so thick that I could barely shove it down in there, because I know how much trouble I was having getting those lead balls in there. If I'm trying to shove this foam in there, it's not gonna go once it gets hung up. So what you're gonna do from here is take this right here, find your last ball and just set it on there, go up to the top, find out how long that's gonna be, and just chop it a little bit below that. We wanna have room for a swivel. Once you have that, you can go ahead and make a whole bunch of them. Remember, I'm gonna make 10 of these, so I'm just gonna cut these all up while we're here. And this stuff, while it is optional, it's like $3 for 20 feet, so there's really no reason not to mess with it. It is super cheap. Now, one thing that I kind of didn't expect is I thought once I seal this up with the adhesive and then I seal my sinker in the top, it'd be watertight, but the swivels do have a hole that go down through the middle, so it's not gonna be watertight. So there's a lot of different materials you could use up top here, but use something that if it gets wet, it's not going to be an issue. That's one reason you might want to steer clear of the steel balls right here and either get some lead shot or pour your own lead balls. And if you're intimidated by pouring lead balls, just get yourself one of these little things. You literally plug it into the wall, wait 10-15 minutes, it heats up, and it's really easy to pour. All you got to do is do it in a well-ventilated area and put some safety gear on, and there's not a whole lot to worry about. And so now that we got that last ball locked in, we're going to shove this foam in there. So again, kind of press your tubing out, make it nice and round, and just get it all the way down there as far as you can. You should be able to feel if it's down on top of that last ball or not. If you need to poke it down a little bit more, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Okay, so at this point, if you want to get really precise, you can figure out where that ends. So mine ends right about there. You put your swivel in, and if you're okay with that gap, leave it. If not, you might want to trim it down a tiny bit more. I'm fine with it. I'm gonna leave it. So we're back to heat gun time again. I'm gonna work my way up again. I don't want any air getting trapped in here, so I'm gonna heat from this side all the way up and just keep spinning, 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 spinning. And then when I get almost up to the top, we're gonna sneak the swivel in and seal it off. Now that we're getting close to the end, I'm gonna get my swivel ready. I just grab one end of it so I can shove the other end in. You don't want to do this with your fingers, you'll burn yourself. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to have gloves for like my hand that's rotating the weight. It is getting pretty warm down where I melted already. And then just let go. So there you go, you got yourself a dragging weight. The nice benefit about having this foam in there is there's a little bit of flotation. So as this thing goes across the bottom, if it comes across an obstruction, it'll kind of have that sinker floated up and it can hop up and over all kinds of materials down there. Whether it's riprap, stumps, trees, whatever it may be, these could probably get through it. So really that's all there is to it. Choose your material. Probably don't use the copper coated steel. Not a great choice. If it's gonna get wet, it's gonna get rusty eventually and break down. Lead's not gonna break down, and of course, lead's not gonna break down. While we're here, I'll show you how I'd make one like this, which is my other recommendation. Probably not this, I'm gonna send this stuff back. All right, so this is 3/8 inch tubing right now. I'll link this down below too. I'm gonna cut this one down to right around 10 inches. And we've got a 3/8 inch steel ball down there. So again, that's gonna rust, but I'm gonna try and get most of it inside the heat shrink here. And we're gonna seal just that end in. So that thing's not going anywhere. I just held it with my pliers because I had to get right up on it. I want to leave the rest of this tubing nice and open because I'm going to pour my lead shot in there, and I have to be real careful here. So I'm going to transfer it to something I can pour better. Okay, slow and steady is the key here. I'm just going to use the corner of this thing and try and make a little funnel with my fingers and get those all in there. If I was actually going to make it with this stuff, I'd get some kind of actual little silicone funnel. And I am going to use some of this 3/8 inch foam again. I'm going to shove that down as far as it'll go and just chop the end of it off. It's not as easy to measure because you can't really tell what's going on in there, but I'm going to pull this one back out and just trim it down a little bit so I have room for my sinker. Shove that back down in there. Sinker on the end. Gonna hold it. Now we just got to shrink that down. And that's a nice another little drifting weight you can make there. Again, sinking on the bottom, a little bit of flotation in the top. It should ride kind of upright, kind of in that position as it drags across the bottom, which in my opinion is ideal. So have some fun with it. Pick some different colors. I like the Goober green with, you know, Goober Time guide service. Of course, we got to go green there. So just make it your own. If you have a better idea for how to make these or some other material or anything like that, even if you try them on your own, write a comment down below, let me know how it goes or what you think. And that's about all there is to it. I love those things. You can dial them in just the way you need them, and they are some fish catching machines, I'll tell you that much. This video is over, but go ahead and check out our channel page where we have all different kind of videos on fishing and boat related projects you can do. Thanks for watching.